Hello and welcome to That Shooting Show. My name's Steve Anderson. I am your humble host, and we are, of course, joined by a good friend of mine, the mighty Beal, and we'll get to him in just a second. But first, I need to thank our partners because sometimes I forget to do that when I'm surrounded by celebrities. Jay, if I'm here and you're here, that means we're both surrounded by celebrities.
It's funny, right in that moment, I walked away, so I wasn't here, but yes.
I figured you'd gone to get your gun so you can dry fire under the table.
Yeah, intentionally left it away from my reach. So obviously,
All right.
yep.
All right. So Walther, as you know, sponsors both of us. Um, on the Walther note, I don't know if you heard, but we had a guy in class in New Jersey, I believe it was New Jersey, who had an alien. Have you
Yeah,
have you seen the alien?
I've handled them a little bit. I've never shot one, but yeah.
And similar to other aliens, they are unpredictable and unreliable. They don't really do what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it.
Yeah, that's what I've heard and kind of been the general consensus. There's one person I know who's shooting them in Canada, who seems to be doing well with them, but anyway, that's it. There's not many people that have them because they're so expensive. So
Right. And the moral of the story there is there was a cop there that provided not one, but two functional firearms for shooters in class. One of the guys' PCC took a dump, and the guy's like, well, here's a Glock. And then the alien was doing alien things. And then he said, well, I'm all out of Glocks, but I got a Walther PDP, and let's try that one. And the guy started shooting better immediately.
yeah,
And what was really interesting was the alien, by standard trigger definition, standard trigger analysis, probably has a better, I don't like using air quotes, but we'll do it anyway, probably has a better trigger. But frequently, when somebody is on an unfamiliar platform, it causes them to pay more attention to fundamentals.
sure, yeah,
And so feeling that different trigger maybe gave him something to focus on a little bit. The only thing I ever noticed with the PDP trigger was that I had to do a little bit more trigger prep than I was accustomed to for
yeah,
longer shots. But that was a very easy adjustment to make. Just a fantastic firearm. Mine is still zero malfunctions that I
yeah.
can recall. I can't think of a time I ever got a click instead of a bang. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, same. And I think I'm through 20,000 rounds on the pair of guns that I have, so maybe more than that.
what's your cleaning schedule like? Is it haphazard or is it pretty meticulous?
Haphazard. I keep the match gun clean.
Sure. And
Um,
I'm not really doing a torture test on purpose, but I don't really like to clean guns. And one of the most interesting things I ever learned when I first started was I had my Smith& Wesson 5906, and back then the conventional wisdom was, all right, you got to push this brush through, but you can't pull it backwards because that'll ruin everything. And I'm like, I can shoot a bullet through here, but I can't pull a brush
oh, bro,
backwards.
I know.
That's very interesting. And then you got to keep working on it till you get a clean patch. Well, that takes 45 minutes,
Yeah,
right?
so my approach is not to clean the barrel at all. So
Yeah, so after enduring that, Brian Enos chimes in and says, "Bore snake the barrel and call it a day." So
yeah,
I bore snake the barrels primarily to clean the chamber. I feel like that's more chamber cleaning. That's obviously more important.
yeah.
I just don't think that. Sorry about the dog noise. I warned you.
It's a we can hear the voices and the dog noise is just back. So,
Good.
you know,
And so I just don't know that the A zone at 8 yards requires the world's greatest mechanical accuracy.
no.
and and frequently people that brag about the accuracy of their guns can't shoot the accuracy of their guns anyway. So what are we really doing? But anyhow, Walther is the title sponsor. Targets USA, as you know, manufactures the finest steel targetry. The AMG-lab.com Commanderson timer continues to turn heads and blow minds with an outrageous lead time. I did speak to Alex a couple days ago,
Yeah.
and he has hired some people, and he's actually going to be on the show next week to talk about the backlog and explain what's happening. And he assures me that they're getting caught up slowly but surely.
Yes, and hopefully on that show he will be announcing something special too.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, which is really exciting because I've been testing it.
Well, and
Anyway, we won't say anymore.
I mean, so what he mentioned to me is anybody that examines your videos closely should be able to maybe see something that's a little different.
Yeah, you could just go back them more closely. Yeah.
Hmm. The people are probably so dismayed by how slow you are at everything that they're distracted and they can't really see what's happening because you're doing everything in such slow motion and they feel so sorry for you. One of these days, Jabel, one of these days. So let's see. AMG Hunters HD Gold, as you know, is the only eyewear that we wear. That's going to bring us to outdoordynamics.net and shootedsportsinnovations.com. I feel like I've left one out. So we got Targets USA. Oh, yes,
You're
Sierra Speed, which reminds me, your rig has made it all the way from South Africa and is nestled safely in my office. And I will get that sent to you as soon as I can.
that's how exciting. I got it directly from the source, delivered by you. So
Smuggled through customs, walked right past the guard dogs with the what's it's not embezzled, smuggled CR Speed gear. And of course, thank
yeah,
you so much, Taz, if you're listening to this. Taz has taken such great care of me. He has taken such great care of me that he doesn't want me to tell people how great a care he's taken of me because he doesn't want to have to do it for other people.
right, right. I mean, just so while we're doing these, but I will say a little bit more about the CR Speed stuff because I feel like maybe people break pouches. I've heard of people breaking magazine pouches. I have not broken magazine pouches ever because I use the CR Speed pouches. They don't
Mhm.
break, and they're really hard to break, and they're great. They're great. And then so while we're talking about sponsors, I will list some of mine. First off, being Steve Anderson of AndersonShooting.com. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, buddy.
And then GX products, which I've been using their because they don't make a race holster, but and we'll experiment with that. But their USPSA legal holster for production and carry optics, which is pretty nice. And then Rune Tactical, if you're interested in getting an extra round in your magazine, it's a pretty cool way to get that without having to do your own modifications. So extra round there, and then Summit City Bullets, which is more of a recent thing for me. And I was using other bullets for a long time, and then I started using these ones, and I immediately noticed that I could group better. Now, I'm not sure if that was me paying attention and actually shooting a group properly or not, but regardless, it was um, it gives me more confidence that I feel like they hit where I put the dot.
Sure,
Like
sure.
so, they've been really good.
I remember that every time you and I have shoot groups together, that was probably your area of greatest improvement that I could ever see. You know, we're going down the line, and I'm like patting you on the head, going, "Well, gosh, Jay, looks like we found something that you're not the greatest in the world at."
I know. So maybe all I needed was just better bullets.
Better bullets. It's very
Who knows?
possible.
And actually, currently for Summit City Bullets, I think they're still going on a 12% off sale. So you can go to, I think that the link is in my profile on Instagram, but you can go to their website and get 12% off an order,
Good.
which is pretty cool. Anyway,
You
the whole
you
podcast will be about sponsors.
you got to show me how to do this link in bio business because it's so confusing to me. We'll have to work on that offline.
Yeah.
I've reached the age apparently where I need children to help me work technology, which is very frustrating.
Well, it doesn't help that Instagram updates their stuff every once in a while and then doesn't update things and so it's not really your fault, Steve.
Well, so let's talk about group shooting for a second. Group shooting is one of the things that I tell people to do that they don't do. And what I know group shooting does is it teaches subconscious trigger control. It teaches that when the shot is more difficult, trigger is more important than sight, as long as sight is acceptable. And good group shooting is can be kind of counterintuitive, can be frustrating to understand. But we have these new pucks. I don't have one with me. My buddy
I saw,
CJ in New Jersey made me a glow in the dark 3D printed coffee cup lid that I can use in class to measure people's groups and then award to the person that shoots the best group.
that's really cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Let's see. So in group shooting is all about and people with a dot, they should for sure do it first thing in the practice session, and they should do it the last thing before an important competition, just to make sure the ammunition and the firearm and the optic are producing acceptable accuracy. I mean, that should be a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think that zero should be checked at least once a week.
Hmm.
I mean, if you're live firing more than that, then I don't know if you have to check it necessarily every single time. But yeah, once a week should be checked for sure. And definitely if it's more, if you're live firing, every 2 weeks or something like that, then you for sure need to check it.
Hmm.
Um,
And what distance are you using for a zero right now?
uh, I don't know. I think it's kind of a joke. It's like whatever. Uh, 15, 12, 13, I don't know, somewhere in that range. But then,
Yeah.
but I shoot groups at 20, 25, and like 50.
You shoot
Um,
groups at 50 yards?
yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. What kind of size do you get?
I think the best groups I've gotten have been like a 5 or 6 inch group,
That's
and that's
awesome.
like 5 rounds ish. And I don't do that often, but shooting at 50 is a really kind of cool experience.
Hmm. I don't know. I mean, I've obviously plinked at 50. I've never shot paper at 50 yards. But I do remember way back in the day going out to the 100-yard range and putting a piece of steel down there. And me and my buddy Kyle Ferris, once we figured out the hold, we could hit that thing every time at 100 yards. It was shockingly easy. Believe it or not, it just wasn't that hard. All right, so let's move on to the question. I don't know if people will be riveted by our idle chit chat. Some will, some won't. Okay, are you ready for the question, Jay?
Let's do it.
Okay. I had previously asked about adding 300ths of a second while firing to ensure more A hits, but also winding up 3 to 5 seconds per stage slower. You answered, but I apparently did a poor job phrasing the query as the answer was off target. So here we go. When I mentally, here, it's speed versus accuracy. Here we go
And
again. When I mentally add the minuscule time during the trigger pull, I also apparently end up slowing down everything else. Entry, exit, sauntering between positions, etc., slowing down the whole stage, and that adds the time. What mental focus can be done to allow the slightly slower, more precise shots and still allow fast physical movement? My brain apparently only hears slow down and get your hits. It's getting old, finishing a stage and seeing the squad finishing off a pizza they ordered at the beep.
yeah, this is so interesting because I think that this question is something that people ask a lot throughout, and definitely when people are newer. Of like, do I speed up or do I slow down? And when I slow down, then everything slows down. So what do I do? Um, and I think that I think that it's comes down to making a decision about what you're going to do. I think that when you during the stage when you add that time to, because we can't judge a 300th of a second. It's I don't think you can do that on during a stage. So you make a decision ahead of time to see what you need to on the target. And
Yeah.
then so I don't I think the approach might be a little bit off on what's happening there. So I think it's mostly done in the programming of a stage where you program where you're going to look during a stage. And then especially on the movement stuff, how I've avoided or how I've maximized just the effort and the aggression for movement is just to look at where I'm going, whether that's a target marker or a foot marker, like you've talked about before. And then all my attention is on that spot until I get there, and then it shifts back to the target. Um, so that kind of takes care of the movement stuff. But then, yeah, the on target stuff, I think it's dangerous to err in the side of like I'm going to intentionally add time to sitting on a sight picture, because you might be sitting on a sight picture that's good enough and you're not pulling the trigger.
So that's an excellent point. That is an angle that I hadn't considered. If he is intentionally trying to add 300ths to his splits, we can't measure that. We don't even know how to do that. And so you make an excellent point. He could have a 5 yard open target that he's trying to add 300ths of a second to that he doesn't need to.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fascinating. So the other thing that I learned, and I may have discovered it during one of our conversations, but my visualization has never included periods of non-shooting.
Yeah.
Like I have never seen myself run 12 feet. All I have seen is the last target and the next target.
Hmm.
And so for me, when I say center the dot, call the shot, the brain is so hungry to do that that it's, and we'll maybe this is dopamine. Maybe the brain wants to hoover up some dopamine and say, hey, you've told me I need to do this thing, or I can't do it until we get over there. So let's get over there so I can do this thing.
Yeah.
Right. So I can see that dot in the middle of the target, watch it lift and do this thing that I love to do. Um, this is a slight detour, but I'm interested in your thoughts. Um, I have recently been reminded that calling the shot is the absolute best occupation for the conscious mind that I think exists. And I don't know if the conscious mind is thinking about it, or I don't know if the conscious mind is watching it happen. Maybe that's the same thing. All I know is when all people care about is calling their shots, it is impossible to think about anything else. Therefore, we have met the criteria for a point of focus for occupying the conscious mind. What do you think?
I mean, that sounds pretty good. I haven't, I guess whenever I'm thinking, if I'm thinking, shot calling is kind of like, if I want to have really good shot calling and I think about it too hard, then it's kind of like thinking about, it's like trying to get into the zone. So when you try and get into the zone, this magical area, then getting there then becomes more elusive. So when I think about just going through my mental process, which I it's just going around the stage looking at where the places that I need to look, then the shot calling it happens because my
Mhm.
my attention can pick up on stuff. I mean, so I don't. Yeah, I think it's something that people have to experiment with. But I think it's a critical skill to have, and then to just be able to keep the awareness that of paying attention to what's happening so that you can see where your bullets go.
Yes. So on the subject of the zone, so the only reason I paused there is we want to make sure people don't misinterpret that statement as looking for holes in
Yeah.
the target. Um,
Right. Yeah. See where they go as the shot is fired.
there we go. Yeah, we don't want somebody to get the wrong idea. Um, I had a 45-minute argument with Lanny Basham about the zone. And it started. I'm sure I've told you this before, but
Yeah.
you've heard all of my stories before, and that's fine. So the subject zone comes up, and he got like uncharacteristically excited for Laney Basham. Laney Basham doesn't really get that excited. So he looks over and he goes, "You ever heard of a guy named Brian Enos?" And I was like, "Yeah." He yells at me if I don't ship him books on time. Of course, I know who Brian Enos is. And so Brian wrote this article about the zone. And the only difference between the zone and the triad state in my mind is that conscious mind and self image disappear for a short period of time. And it's only subconscious skill. And I
Mhm.
think a true zone is more common in a reactive sport, tennis, basketball, pickleball, something like that. Um, versus our proactive sport where you're not really reacting to things except what you're seeing, but that's not really changing except with exception of movers.
Yeah.
That conversation ended with Lanny saying that the triad state, conscious, subconscious, self-image, and balance when working together, is better than the zone because it can be induced.
Yeah, because it's more consistent overall. Yeah.
Controllable. Yep, absolutely. Now let's go back to this guy's question. Um, I think people make too big of a distinction between their speed mode dry fire and their match mode dry fire. I think a lot of people out there when they go into a match mode dry fire environment, I think they intentionally slow down and shoot perfect shots.
I did that for a while, and that was a mistake. Yeah. So now the difference is on makeup shots.
Right.
Like you have said so many times
Yeah.
that all it is on the fill-in shots or whatever they're called. Whatever cast.
It's so funny. I try to use the South Africa terms and he tries to use the American terms. Like I'm talking about meters and he's talking about yards, and we should switch it, so we can both.
But
And it's so funny when you were talking about a zero. I was thinking Gaz could tell you his zero in feet, centimeters, yards, and meters.
yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. But going back to the guy's question, so come out of your speed mode dry fire, in which the timer is more important than the target. That's all that means. And then really all you got to do is activate the makeup switch without consciously slowing down. I am 99.9% sure that the conscious control of speed in competition is an error. What do you think?
I agree. I agree. And I think that it comes from self-image like most things do. But if you think you're not fast enough, or if you think you're, going too fast, or whatever, because it's been ingrained for so long of like, oh, you're missing some targets there, you should probably slow down, which is certainly the worst thing to tell somebody, especially someone who is new and they're just going out there and they're having fun and they're missing, and they're like, they're on the right track. The sport is so speed biased that why would you ever tell anyone to slow down? I mean, what do you say? I I think that avoiding the terms, like any kind of speed terms, is good anyway. But so what do you use to replace slow? Or
Well, so as I've said numerous times, my absolute favorite shooter to work with is somebody who is fast and sloppy. That's my favorite shooter because it's 100% mental. But those guys have trouble learning to trust that by themselves. For example, if if you're if you're fast and sloppy, but you practice by yourself and you set something up that isn't a classifier with a known hit factor, you don't know if 6 seconds is a good time or not.
yeah, you don't know.
And so it feels kind of slow. We have good points. We did it in 6 seconds. Unless it's something like El Pres or again a classifier that has some sort of time standard, they don't know. And as a result, they don't trust that this is. Well, we had a heck of a country day this morning, Jay. We had some.
They know talking about very important.
Yeah, yeah. The worst part is that every other bark has a fart associated with it. So it's like if there's three barks, there's one fart. So there's like one fart for every three barks.
I
It's a
hope
pretty good.
people are chuckling about that because that's pretty funny.
It's a pretty high fart factor. So we've had farts per second, farts per bark. It's about a three bark fart factor. But so we had some interesting things happen. The Doberman likes to chew on the leashes, which is not a problem. Well, it is a problem. So Amazon delivered a package perilously close to the neighbor dog, right? So here I am, and I'm actually practicing my sideways shuffle as I inch closer to this package while I restrain these dogs, right? And so here I am working on my shuffle, trying to get to my package, make your own jokes. And then right when I'm about to go for this package on the ground, Rogue's leash, the biggest Great Dane, his leash snaps because the Doberman's been chewing on it. So he takes off toward the neighbor dog, and this inspires the other two to drag me through the wet grass on my side for about 20 yards. Kind of like a canine powered slip and slide, right? So we got that recovered, and then this morning I had to go out and rescue two escaped chickens. So that was and I'm kind of afraid of the chickens, so I have to kind of corner them. And the funny thing about chickens is when you get them cornered, they kind of just plop down. So that's kind of easy.
Yeah,
Do you have chickens?
No, I have had them before multiple times.
Yeah, how's the goat world? We'll get back to shooting in a minute, but how's the goat world?
The goat world um is pretty good, but goats are, I mean, like all animals, it's different because there's never a known of exactly what's going to happen. So you have to be very kind of fluid on how situations unfold. Even just with milking them, you don't know when they're going to, you know, kick stuff or, you know, so it's keeps you just very present and focused. So it's
And
good.
I would imagine that you have a high level of subconscious skill, which is unlocked by confidence, right?
Yeah, I certainly do with all goat activities. Yeah.
All right, so let's try to answer this guy's question definitively.
Yeah.
And this is the oldest question in the sport. I mean, this question was asked after the first match and continues to be asked after every match.
Mhm.
And what I need people to understand is if you want to do things quickly in between shots, you've got to train that way
Mhm.
and you've got to make that normal, right?
Yeah.
And then anytime you're trying to mentally calculate the time something's taken in competition, you are making an error.
Y-
Um,
You
have you
said
ever had a good result from pre-selecting a speed?
no. I mean, it's like it's the same thing as hero or zero. You know, it works 1 out of 20 times, which is
Mhm.
what Mason Lane has said uh, a long time ago. I heard him say that it works 1 out of 20 times. Think about how that would work for a 20 stage match.
Well, I'm not a math whiz, but once.
Would work one time.
Would work one time. And I always predict that the gimmicky speed shoot is usually won by some A-class kid you've never heard of at major matches.
Yeah.
Um, and I seem to recall they ran El Prez probably 5 years ago now at nationals, and I don't remember anybody being under 5 seconds, which is certainly every GM in the world can do that in under 5 seconds.
If they ran that classifier now at a nationals, there would be people under 5. But just because the skill has gone up. But yeah, at the time, like yeah,
Well, and so it's a let's see, that's a 60 point 60 30 point let's see how many points is that?
60 points.
60 points, right. Do I really want to come out of there with 15 match points or 5 match points, or do I want to come out of there with 58 match points or 55 match points? Right.
Yeah.
And there's just no reason to there's no reason to risk it. So going back to this guy's question, what I want you to do is come out of your normal part-time based dry fire, go immediately into a match mode dry fire without slowing down, and only the only change is activating the makeup switch. Because if you slow down to shoot perfect alphas in your match mode dry fire, number one, you're practicing slowing down to get your hits, but number two, you never learn instant makeups.
Yeah.
If you don't have instant makeups in your dry fire, you never learn it.
Yeah.
Now, when I look at your videos, when you're doing stage type stuff, are you working inside of a part time?
Uh, Sometimes, mostly with stage type stuff. No, I'm not.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
And are you running that same stage numerous times, or is that just a one and done match mode exercise?
Sometimes I'll run them like 2 or 3 times because if I notice something that I want to kind of refine a little bit more, then I'll address it right then. So I'll do something a handful of times and then move on. But if I'm doing specific match mode stuff, I'm doing it once.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's
Yeah.
that's extremely important. Now, are you still using part times for anything?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, Absolutely.
And I think the last time we've talked about this a little bit, and you don't have to tell people everything you're doing. That's fine. But you've probably evolved away from the core 12 drills pretty much.
No, I mean, recently I've got back into doing them because there's so much benefit that comes from doing. I mean, within those draws, there's 30 minutes of just drawing. I mean, within those drills, there's 30 minutes of just spent drawing if you do 5 minutes per drill.
Hmm.
which is extremely valuable.
Yeah. And
So,
the and you know, people may think that those drills are designed for a fast draw, but that's not what they were written for. They were written for a 100% reliable first sight picture with iron sights.
mhm.
Um, and of course, the dot makes that much easier. But all we're doing is getting the an absolute guaranteed accurate first shot. Because when I was shooting bowling pin matches, that was the only problem I had was an accurate first shot.
Yeah, and I mean, the draw is so much more too. It's you're training the ability to look somewhere and then have the dot show up exactly where you're looking.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do a very similar format to your 12 drills. It's just it's more variety, I think, and I change things up. But then sometimes I go back and do them strictly how they're written. Um, so it's good.
And then I know that you've struggled for a while to get your first shot under a second. And Gaz and I want to urge you to continue. I think there's a 99 in your future.
I mean, if you guys keep on, bringing it up, then I think I'll find some motivation in that. I'm sure.
But you know, frequently, and this question has come up 3 times lately, and I do want to talk about it because there's this new term called reactive versus man, I'm drawing a blank. Predictive versus reactive. And as I understand that, I would say that I think my best ever first shot was a 53 when I was working on point shooting versus dot shooting which was fascinating.
Mhm.
Um,
That was a good video.
it was so awesome because point shooting was doing really good until that string where I had like 4 Charlies and a Delta and a Mike with the exact same, whatever you want to call it. But I think for a 53 first shot, I am absolutely seeing the dot as the gun goes off, as
Hmm.
opposed to throwing the dot out there, studying it, measuring it, putting it in the inside corner of the triangle, and then firing the shot.
Yeah. I mean, all of this comes from and they and uh so Hwansik Kim, who is on the Walther team, great shooter, he came up with levels of confirmation. So you have, and I think there's probably infinite levels, but he labeled them as three levels. And so you have just how much you confirm that the site is where it should be. And so, at that 5 yard target, how much confirmation do you actually need? Not much. So that would be, level one confirmation. And then if you have a 12 yard target, then maybe you need a little bit more confirmation that the dot is in the center of the target. So then you're at level two, and then you go back and you put a 6 inch plate at 30 yards, and maybe you need to even more than that. So that's kind of what I think of. And then you can apply that whole, you know, predictive or reactive to it. But I think that a lot of the time we're doing some type of predictive shooting where the dot bounces up. And then as we predict where the dot is going to come down to. And so we time the shot to go off when the dot comes back down. So we're
Mhm.
then predicting where it's going to be. But this is not without visual information. I think that's a lot of times confusing. So if you go through a stage and you're like, well, I don't need to see anything on this target, well, then that will result in kind of some wild shooting.
And do any of those 3 levels? Oh, it's interesting. You have a clock over your right shoulder there, so it's very easy to keep track of the time.
Yeah, we're doing pretty good.
And you have a very lonely shoe over there too. I feel sorry for that shoe. He's just over there doing nothing.
Oh, maybe yeah.
He's over there hoping you don't go for a barefoot run. He gets to go out for some action. I hope Jay wears me today. I want to go for a run barefoot. But I just want to wrap this up so we can talk about some other stuff.
Yeah.
Do any of those levels of confirmation advocate point shooting with a dot gun?
I I don't know. I think that maybe I don't know if it advocates it. I wouldn't say that it advocates it. I think that it says like the amount. So if you have a target that is actually touching your muzzle, then what you need to confirm is that when the shot break that your body is aligned to the A zone. That's the only thing you need to confirm. So, but if we've been dry firing a lot, you'll probably see the dot anyway.
Whew, thank God.
So
Say that one more time, nice and loud.
You're going, so if you have been dry firing, which if you want to get better, then you should dry fire, then you will just see the dot anyway. So it's
Hmm.
not even a question of you don't need to see it, you're going to see it.
Right.
But if you are, you know, coming up to a really close target and it's touching your muzzle and you don't see your dot, maybe your dot is broken. Should you wait to see your dot till you shoot? I don't think you should wait for it because because you know that the bullet will hit the A zone. So if
So
you
if yes, so all right, so here's my newly revised position on point shooting. If your muzzle is touching the target in the A zone, you have my permission to not see your dot.
Yeah, I mean, just because you know anybody, you could put it there, you could close your eyes and pull the trigger and it would go there.
But here's the danger with that. And that's obviously an extreme example. The danger, so let's just say somebody turns that into 1 yard, and then they turn it into 3 yards, and then they turn it into 5 yards. Okay. As you said earlier, anybody who's dry firing is going to see the dot. And I think there's a distinction between seeing the dot and using the dot that might be sort of in the reactive versus predictive world. I would go so far as to say I'm seeing the dot more than I'm using the dot, but that might be splitting hairs too fine. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think that would be a very responsible way to talk about it. Is that you see it, you are aware of it, and that's it. You are just aware of the dot. Anything beyond that, you're using it too much, and then you're going to be off the pace.
And the other interesting thing that happens there that's very frustrating is like if you take the 25-yard mini popper, a guy is going to get such a perfect sight picture that he's going to hit that trigger very, very hard before he loses his perfect sight picture, which of course brings us back to group shooting. Group shooting teaches you that the amount of wobble that you see is not a big deal unless you make it worse by honking that trigger really hard.
Yeah, yeah.
So
There's this really interesting sliding. It's not a level. I don't think of it as a level system. It's a sliding scale on like what you need to see, and that's a line, and
mhm.
it whatever a graph picture. Imagine things in your mind, and that goes along with trigger as well. What's
Right,
required from the trigger it changes on that line as well, and
right.
it's not going to be the same for everything because you there's so many variables. Like if you're moving, or if the ground has rocks on it, or whatever. There's so many variables, which is why it's kind of hard to talk about.
Which is also why a singular point of focus with access to subconscious skill is going to produce your best performance on that day. This is not subject to debate because people have been saying forever, I shoot my best when I'm not thinking, I don't care. Well, that's fine. Lanny Basham figured out a way to duplicate that environment when you are thinking and you do care. Case closed. It's as simple as that. And learning to use 100% of mental management is the key to getting subconscious skill on demand under pressure.
Yeah.
Um,
So
before we go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just going to say before we jump to anything either, to this question of what you need to do, I think that it helped me so much before I even started really shooting competition was hearing you say, because I was thinking like, do I go fast? Do I slow down? And then you said you don't even have to make that choice on competition day. You don't have to make the choice. So I was like, oh, really? I don't have to. So then you just do your mental process.
Mm-hmm.
So you use however words you want to say it in, or whatever it makes sense to you. Like see what you need to see, and that's going to change, and that's going to be different for everyone. But you just program to see something on every target.
Mm-hmm. Which gives your conscious mind something to do, something to think about, which will always allow access to subconscious skill in accordance with confidence.
Yep.
Um, you know the mental management performance model, right?
Yeah.
All right. So what I want to remind people of is that those of you that have had mental management, I want to remind you, those that haven't, I want to give you a little teaser. Your confidence level can be managed in real time as you walk the stage by restricting your thinking about that stage to positive, successful thoughts, right? So let's say I've struggled on Texas Stars, okay? And that's my self image going in. I'm expecting to have trouble on this Texas Star, but I see this one and it's really slow, right? So now, as I'm walking that stage and building my stage plan, I can think, hey, I've got a better than normal chance at being successful here because this one's really slow and that plays to my strengths. And so for every 20, well, so if we walk the stage and or visualize the stage 20 times, we can send 20 imprints to self-image that we expect to be successful, primarily because of strategy.
Yeah.
Right. And understanding how that works on a large scale with your shooting career and all of your skills in general, and on a small scale with specific stages. Like, what is your all-time favorite kind of stage to shoot?
Something that has me sliding up on the scale of like needing to see a lot and press the trigger carefully, to way down on the scale where the requirement for vision is lower, and then everywhere in between. So something that requires some close fast shooting and some further away shooting and some that combines everything. That's my favorite kind of stage.
And you like that better than a straight up hoser stage?
Yeah, because I don't think a hoser stage tests very much. You'll have everybody really close in the results. Like you'll have B class people hanging with GMs on that stage.
I know, but they're so much fun.
Yeah, they're fun, and people will. I mean, people still can separate themselves on those stages, but yeah, yeah, I know. I guess I want something that tests all of it.
Okay. And do you feel comfortable? You may not even have a least favorite kind of stage.
I'm trying to think. I mean, if a stage is all partials, and it's not because I can't hit them, but I think it's just a kind of a dumb stage. So that might be. Yeah, not one from a shooting perspective, but just from a design perspective. Yeah.
And if it was 100% partials and they were close, would you find yourself shooting alphas or would you back in the center of the available?
If they were all close, I mean, it would depend on the hit factor. I think if the hit factor might then be higher, so I might be a little bit more towards center of available if they're all partials because the hit factor is so high.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. And then anything you gain on in that environment, anything you gain from shooting majority of alphas will be negated immediately by a no shoot and or a mic.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's just that math is just, and so let's just say that one more. Let's just hit that one more time. Have you ever regretted shooting a partial in the center of the available target area?
No, I have not.
Have you
I
ever
have.
regretted? Have you ever regretted going for the alphas?
Yeah, I have. It's funny how that works because you could be like, well, I kind of, maybe I could have aimed a little bit more in the alpha, but then it's like, yeah, but when you have done that in the past, what could happen and what has happened,
Hmm.
is that you hit a no shoot, and yeah, you make it up, but you're still down 10 points.
Yeah, and that Charlie is far less likely to cost you match points than the no shoot and or corresponding mic.
Yeah,
So
I think
a
I
heads
think
up
it's
for
just
that.
you just do it right the first time, which so just look at the right spot on the target the first time.
Right. All right. You want to talk about dopamine a little bit? You
I
seemed
think
very
we
interested in that.
Yeah, it is I think it is interesting. Yeah, and
Go
you
ahead.
brought it up, so I'm curious how you were thinking of it.
So I have noticed that I'm probably on some scale of mental illness somewhere, whether it's ADHD, ADD, general anxiety, something along those lines. And I have noticed that if I fixate on my phone, it becomes this compelling desire to see if I've missed something.
Yeah,
And maybe it's like that for everybody, but here's the deal with those things. Everybody thinks they're normal. So I think we're all normal and we're also all abnormal with regard to that. But there's just no question that when this device, it provides something that our brain likes, wants, or needs.
yeah,
And that is the only reason that social media even exists, because somebody figured out, hey, we can get these mice coming after this cheese and we can make money on it.
yeah. I mean, I think billions of dollars were spent to design something that would do exactly that. So we're fighting against billions and billions of dollars of research when we just try not to look at your phone or whatever.
So maybe, but then again, is it something that they designed or is it something that they noticed?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
if we go back to Facebook, it was originally designed to keep track of whether we thought the girls in our class were cute or not, right? Did you know that?
no. Well, it was
That's
yeah, yeah,
as I understand it, that's the origin of Facebook. We'd have to go back and watch that movie, and our dopamine receptors may require us to go do that now that we've talked about it. But then I would say somebody noticed, hey, this guy shows a picture of his breakfast and people go look at his breakfast. We could probably sneak an ad in there somewhere and make a little money every time this guy goes looks at somebody's breakfast. But bringing that back to shooting, the reason we're talking about this is you are intentionally separating yourself from your phone to create more practice time, right?
yeah, yeah. Because I went looking for. I was like, I want to add these things to my training. How do I do that? And then I was like, where is my time spent when I'm not training? And so like I'm looking at my family time and I'm thinking, well, I can't take away from that. So then I look at where like how much time I spend on my phone, and I'm like, well, I can definitely shave that off. And so then that's what gets shaved off. And then that's where you brought up the dopamine thing, which so there was, there's instant hits of dopamine, which I think come from your phone because all you have to do is open up your screen and see what people are doing, and then you get some kind of dopamine hit. Um, and then there's the dopamine that you get from doing things that are difficult, like or require a barrier to entry. So like there's a barrier to earning it. So dry firing is one of those. There's a barrier there. Dry firing, and then after the session is done or during the session, you'll get probably after. That's when I feel like I've done it. Then I get a dopamine hit there, and then there's a live fire session that will happen after that session is complete. I don't get it before. Um, so and it's the same thing. Like when I wake up in the morning and I go and I don't look at my phone immediately. I avoid that specifically. So I'll put it away. I won't look at it until I've done um, stuff that I do in the morning, which is like getting into the cold water, which I know after I get out of the cold water, I get a dopamine hit, a
Hmm,
really big one,
interesting.
huge. Uh,
So probably me going to fix my lawnmower has a barrier of entry, and I know I'm going to feel like a superstar when I get that thing fixed.
100%. Yeah.
The little selector tab that gauges how high the wheels are snapped off on my range somewhere. And I was going to buy a new mower, but geez, mowers are $400 now just for a self-propelled push mower is $400. I'm like, well, let's try to fix this rear axle. So I'm going to go do that as soon as we get done. As I told you, I was out of commission for 9 months the last time I tangled with a mower. So there will be gloves and tools and no ER trips today. We're gonna do this correctly.
That's great. Yeah, but I totally relate to the fixing things. Yeah, dope. Yeah, I mean, and so I don't know. I mean, I think dopamine has been talked about. There's probably some podcasts on it, and maybe I've listened to them, but dopamine is more of a like a motivation chemical or a motivation. What is dopamine? It's a what are the chemicals in your body that do things? Hormones. It's a hormone.
Okay.
Um, and it's a motivation one because you want it again. So
Mm,
then you're motivated to do the thing that gave you the dopamine.
that
So
makes
it's
sense.
it gives you motivation. And so that's why I find it valuable to like leverage it in a intelligent way, or is currently what I think of as intelligent.
Well, let me ask you this. Is that what's happening when people speed mode a stage and get that glorious hair on fire feeling from pulling the trigger as fast as possible, whether they saw anything or not? Is that a dopamine hit?
Probably if the stage went well, it's a big enough hit to make you want to do it again. Yeah.
What if it
And
didn't go well?
again, yeah, as so then that comes in where you block things where you'd be like, yeah, but I went fast. Like I didn't hit anything, but I went fast. So then you can kind of push that aside and then you get your dopamine.
But the
So
feeling's the same. So let's say we have a hoser stage. We've decided, okay, I'm gonna predictive shoot this with a level one confirmation. I'm gonna touch my muzzle to the A zone. I think when you unload and show clear, I think you get the full hit.
sure.
And then something changes if there's a bunch of mics. I guess the, I guess the point I'm trying to make is people's tendency to rush, try, hurry on a regular basis. Is that providing a dopamine hit?
It
And is that
probably
why they're doing it?
it probably is.
It has to be. Why else?
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't do it for any other reason.
Yeah, and that so it's kind of funny because that one's easy. There's a less of a barrier to entry for that than there is for winning a match. There's more work required to win a match than there is to go fast on a stage and get a little dopamine.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
yeah.
you have to balance. So you have to deny yourself the
Hmm.
hit during the match so you can get a bigger hit when you see your results, maybe.
I think so. I think so. And denying that, as we know, it's really hard sometimes to not pick up your phone. So then
Sure.
you have to do something intentional away from that. It's you can't tell yourself not to do something. But so it's yeah, it's like a really easy thing you could grab during a match, but instead of grabbing that, you have to redirect your attention to your mental process and what you're doing and what you're actually there to do.
Right. Do you have any big matches coming up?
I have I'm shooting a match in New Hampshire. I think it's the sectional match. It's a level two this weekend, and then IPSC Nationals in Florida in November. And
Oh, so you okay, so you need that holster quick, don't you?
well, no, at this point I probably won't just switch over to a race holster,
Okay.
just because I have a lot of time on the other one. I'm kind of just curious to see what if there's an advantage there to a bucket holster like I've been using for so long. Um,
I will tell you what the advantages are.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. There is an environment where you can begin to, so like if you think about a bucket holster, the gun has to come up before the muzzle can rise.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. The only thing a race holster is going to do is reduce that amount of time.
Yes,
Okay.
that was my first thought. So that was more curious. I was like, how does this look on the timer? What kind of time am I saving?
So I doubt that you, I mean, as a party trick, you might be able to get a hundredth of a second if you intentionally tried to rotate that muzzle. And we can only be talking about fractions of seconds, right?
Yeah, it's not going
Um,
to be necessarily a tenth. I might have been hopeful when I imagined a tenth in my mind. I was like,
I
well,
mean,
maybe.
so here's the benefit of a race holster is it frees you to try things that you might not try with a bucket holster. And the potential downside of race holsters is maybe too much adjustability, although now we're running these hangers that provide the same level of adjustability. When I first got the race holster, I was constantly adjusting it for the first week I had it, trying to find the exact optimal angle for hands at sides and surrender. And
Mm.
what I discovered is straight up and down on the hip bone is the best compromise for everything.
Yeah, that's what I've always come back to. And I've run some hangers that have had a lot of adjustability, and I ran into the same thing. It's too much stuff for me to even be thinking about. Better off just leaving it.
And if we were 100% steel challenge, or if steel challenge was our primary, there is an adjustment you can do to give a slightly better hands at side surrender draw. You
Hmm.
can rock the gun back just a little bit, and that can be good, but that really makes the angle awkward for the wrist below belt or hands at sides,
Yeah.
and that was not a trade-off that I was willing to make. Um, and the other downside of rocking the gun back on your turn-in draw means you have to come around further because your muzzle's now slightly forward of the body,
Hmm.
and it makes it a lot easier to break the 180. Like if you think of the standard senior citizen steel challenge draw, where it's like sitting way back like this, and the guy's he's oh, I had a term for it. They'll the downward rotator. So he'll take his hand off his gun and he'll rotate his elbows out and then just bring them back down. Um, If
Yeah.
steel challenge is your primary, that can be an effective draw. But for a turn and draw, which I've always been obsessed with for some weird reason, must provide a good dopamine hit.
Yeah.
Uh, you're far more likely to break the 180 because the muzzle is now in front of the body. You've got to come around a lot further. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm thinking about like what dry fire activities provide a good dopamine hit, and for sure it's yeah, reloads definitely do. Turn and draws and reloads because reloads sound kind of cool, you know.
and
Like
it's so satisfying when you get them right. Um,
yeah,
but reload is probably the thing in dry fire that gives people the most anxiety. Um, and then ironically, I'm talking to a guy and he says, "Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. When I practice reloads by themselves, they don't go very well, but when they're just part of something else, they go great. What's going on there?" And
yeah,
then I tell him for the 10,000th time, what do I tell him?
yeah. Just don't practice the reloads by themselves.
I know.
I, it's, yeah, that's just it's a huge thing. When you practice a reload, if you want to get better at the reload, you work on the Burkett reload and you work on the pause and effect reload, which you've done. And then you combine those two together with an intentional pause at the magwell. And then you're done working on the reload. Then go do some six reload six stuff or do some reloads on the move or whatever. Um, but yeah, not by themselves.
And well, so that craze got started by the famous Travis Tomasi barracks video. I'm sure you've seen it,
Oh yeah, yeah.
where he is very obviously doing reloads by themselves. And I'm just here to tell you, gang, if you do not see the magwell on a reload, your success rate will be less than 100%. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah, yeah, that and getting your finger on the magazine. And so, okay, the only time we are allowed to do reloads in isolation if you are making a video like Travis Tomasi or for Travis Tomasi. Or if Travis Tomasi asked you to make a reload video, then you do it by yourself. By
Of
himself.
course. Of
Of course.
course. And so anytime I'm really interested in a live fire reload without a magwell. The last time I went down, my best was 119. And I know you'll pat me on the head and say, "Nice job, keep trying." Um,
Yeah.
it was, but I always start in that environment with the gun aimed at the target, and I have the timer running. So I'm not reacting to the start tone. I'm trying to isolate out as many variables as I possibly can. And I'm up really close on a target because a lot of people, what people don't realize about reloads is the distance to the target makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Because trying to reacquire that sight picture at 20 yards is going to be a whole lot different than at 2 yards.
Yeah.
And if we're looking for a party trick, get right up on that sucker. Um,
Yeah.
what do you think? I was going to ask you something. Oh, you did a video. You did a video a long time ago where you came to the conclusion for you that proximity to the firing position wasn't a huge deal for you. Did you study that?
Yeah, I mean,
This has been a long time.
I experimented with it quite a bit on just the reload position and thinking about consistency without a magwell. Um, and if I think of it more as the magwell coming closer to my face instead of like down low. So if I think it just bringing it closer to my face, then the consistency goes up because of more control of items here than way away from my face. And so for me, I'll bring the magwell closer to my face. And by magwell, I mean my guns don't have magwells, but then if you do have a big magwell, then you can get away with more. You have more margin for error. So to take advantage of that, you leave it a little bit further out.
Oh, so you weren't talking about up and down. You were talking about out and in.
Yeah, and I might have, and like when you go in, maybe it comes down a little bit. Maybe there is a little bit of down, but not intentionally down.
And
Uh,
I think you have slightly longer than average arms too, which makes a big difference. For a guy your height, you seem like you have pretty long arms.
maybe, maybe.
And that changes a lot because somebody with short arms, they're moving a lot less stuff, a lot less distance, whereas somebody with orangutan arms, as you're trending towards, uh, cannot cannot do a great reload with that arm all the way out there, but just because the distances are so great, you may have to come
Yeah,
back further.
it's got to go in. Which you bring up a really good point there of that everybody is different. I mean, I've been asked so many times, and I just put a video somewhere about like where do I index my support hand on the frame during a draw? Like where do I do that? And we're like, I don't know. The answer is going to be different for. I mean, I know where my callus is on my finger, where probably I guess that's where I index it, but I've never thought about it. So the answer that I'm now giving people, which we can thank Saul for this, because I think it's a really good answer, is you go and do 30 hours of draws, and then tell me.
Hmm.
Then you tell me where your index point is.
It is so funny that you mentioned that because anytime somebody asks me a question that specific, I literally have to do one to answer the question
Yeah.
because I never stopped doing reps to ask those questions. And it's so common people will do one rep of something and then they want to study that rep for 20 minutes. Let's just do another one.
Yeah. Just
Let's
do
just,
So that's becoming my default answer. So if you're thinking about asking Steve where his index point is, then you should just go and do 30 hours of draws, not in 2 days. Don't do that many draws in that short amount of time. But in over a few months or whatever, do 30 hours of draws, and then tell Steve where your index point is.
yeah, I mean, I just solved it with reps. I mean, you could get in front of a mirror and you could use slow motion video if you're more technically minded. But the only thing I ever did was figure out how long does it take me to do this thing, whatever it is. Okay, what can I do to do it a tenth of a second faster?
Mhm.
And what can I do? And back then I didn't know any better. Although I suppose I did get there. But now, of course, we talk about find something to do sooner instead of throwing speed at it. And
Yeah.
I suppose I was doing that back then. But I was having so much fun I didn't care. That's
Good.
that's the point I'm trying to
The,
make.
the thing is, you're just doing it. You're just
Yeah.
doing it. You're having fun. You're getting your dopamine hits, life is great.
And I'm acquiring positive imprints, which
Yeah.
is the thing. This might be a good place to wrap it up because we're running a little bit long. Um,
Yep.
what is damaging people the most is negative imprints during training. That
Yeah.
is causing, so anybody out there that has a mental game problem, you are most likely damaging your self-image with negative imprints during training. And somebody says, well, you're telling me to pat myself on the head when I get it wrong. No, that's not what we're saying. We're
No.
saying pat yourself on the head when you get it right, because
Yeah.
you're probably getting it right more often than you're getting it wrong.
Yeah. I mean, you've said it so many times. I mean, Lanny has said it, but you were always working on your mental game, whether you realize it or not. So so take advantage of the times when you do something correctly and say, yeah, that was good. What did I do? And that's all you have to do. You don't even have to ask yourself what you did. You just do it again. Just do it again.
So you probably this is a great question for you because I have heard you say in the past that when you're working on something, you expect there to be, you wouldn't use the word failure. I think you called them experiments,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're not always going to be successful.
No. I don't expect them necessarily to be either, unless and you and Gaz brought this up, unless you've made a decision to have a good performance.
And that's not training anymore. That's shooting for score.
No, yeah, then you're performing.
Right.
There's a big difference between training and performing.
And I think a lot of times people don't know which one they're in.
Yeah, probably.
Well, like for example, if I continue to go after a 3 second El Pres, if I could do a 299 with four mics, I probably would celebrate for months.
Hmm.
If I
Yeah,
could do, man, if I could do a 299 and get all 12 shots off with four mics, I'd be the happiest guy maybe on the planet for some period of time because you need a
yeah,
point eight first shot, you need a point eight reload, and your splits and transitions are 14s.
yeah,
And one of those has to be a 13.
yeah, yeah,
And I just don't know how much of my life I wanted. I just don't know how much of my life I want to devote to that party trick, you know.
yeah, yeah.
And I want to continue to thank you for not doing one because I'm sure you probably could.
That one's for you, Steve.
Do you think you
That,
could do it? Do you think you'd go out today and do it?
probably not today because I think I need to get a point 0.6 turn and draw, and then give that time to the splits,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Especially, yeah,
point 0.8 loads fine. Um, but that needs to be, yeah, I need to give that time to the splits.
that's pretty smart because I am not currently capable of 14 splits and transitions.
No,
Um, that's
that yeah, that's I think it's possible that the splits might take more time to develop than like the turn and draw. Like I could get the turn and draw down to 0.6 in some time.
my best ever is a 0.79, which is the cover of Get to Work. I don't know if you knew that. The
Yeah,
cover of Get to Work is my best ever turn and draw, and it took me. I was working on that for about 2 hours one day,
yeah,
and there were people gathered under the shelter. Then when I finally did it, they all applauded. They had no idea what they were applauding. They just knew that I'd reached my goal.
yeah. And just so you know, whenever you do this 299 El Pres, someone in the comments of the video will say, "Yeah, I think you maybe broke the 180 just a little bit when the gun came out of the holster." The comment is inevitable.
And you know what I'll say? DQ me. Don't care. Don't
You
care.
yeah, you just tell them that you DQ'd yourself immediately after the video was done and not to worry about it.
All right, buddy. It's been so great. We could obviously do this all day. Is there anything else you want to add real quick before we go?
No, I think it's probably a good time to go. The kids are awake after their nap, and so I should go be a father,
Yeah,
which
I'm
is
gonna go.
great.
I'm gonna go replace the rear axle assembly on a Troy built push mower with gloves and tools.
Yes, enjoy your dopamine.
It's gonna be awesome. All right, bud. Thank you so much. And let's do the catchy catchphrase until we meet again. Be like us. Do what we do. Say it with us. One, two, three.
Get to work.
Get to work.